What if the deadliest criminals didn't wear masks or carry guns, but walked into office buildings in suits, signed paperwork, and spoke calmly into microphones? What if genocide could be organized like a board meeting, and war could be marketed like a business deal? This is the true story of two men, a president and a prime minister, who turned power into a weapon more lethal than bullets. Charles MacArthur, Gankay Taylor, Jean Kambanda, two men from two nations, Liberia and Rwanda, once respected, now remembered as architects of some of the most horrific crimes in modern African history. One led a brutal proxy war funded by blood diamonds. The other signed papers that fueled a genocide. Both were heads of state. Both were convicted of crimes against humanity. Taylor, born in 1948, was once an economics student in the United States. Kambanda, born in 1955, was a trained chemical engineer. Neither was a soldier by origin, yet both orchestrated unimaginable violence. The United Nations estimates that Taylor was indirectly responsible for over 50,000 deaths in Sierra Leone alone. Kambanda's government presided over the Rwandan genocide. Nearly 800,000 people murdered in 100 days. Two different men, two different methods, but the same result: mass murder, ethnic cleansing, and the calculated destruction of societies. And yet, if you strip away their titles and crimes, one was a polished statesman, fluent in diplomacy and the language of politics. The other was a soft-spoken bureaucrat, deliberate and quiet. They could have been your professor, your neighbor, your boss. That's the unsettling truth. Which brings us to a disturbing question. Who is more dangerous, the man with the gun or the man with the stamp? Taylor commanded militias and child soldiers, weaponized fear, and traded diamonds for rifles. Kambanda distributed firearms through administrative orders and delivered hate speech via state radio. One controlled the jungle, the other ran the capital. The world didn't see them coming, and when it did, it was too late. But what made them turn? What did they believe in? Were they monsters, or just men made monstrous by the systems they ruled? To understand that, we have to go back to their origins, their rise, and the methods they used to stain history with blood. Charles Taylor's journey into violence began long before he donned the title of president. Born in a politically fragile Liberia, he studied economics in the United States, absorbing not just knowledge, but the mechanics of power and profit. Upon his return, he entered public service, but soon faced corruption charges. When the system turned against him, he disappeared, only to re-emerge as the leader of a rebel movement. In 1989, Taylor launched a civil war that would consume Liberia and spill into Sierra Leone. He wasn't driven by ideology, he wasn't fighting for the people. He was building an empire of chaos, sustained by diamonds, arms trafficking, and young soldiers who should have been in school. Taylor didn't need loyalty, he inspired fear. He funded his war machine by trading so-called blood diamonds, untraceable gems mined through slave labor in war zones, in exchange for weapons. The UN later uncovered that he had orchestrated an arms for gems network across West Africa. By the late 1990s, he had turned war into a business model, with terror as its marketing strategy. Jean Kambanda, in contrast, wielded no armies. He didn't need to. When the Rwandan president's plane was shot down in April 1994, chaos erupted. Within hours, Kambanda was appointed Prime Minister of a provisional government. What followed wasn't just a power grab, it was a descent into genocide. Kambanda didn't carry a gun, but he signed orders to distribute thousands of them. He didn't lead massacres, but he authorized the funding of Interahamwe militias, the death squads responsible for much of the killing. Kambanda's weapon wasn't violence itself, but the smooth machinery of government. His signature on a memo could mean death for an entire village. His public speeches weren't about national unity, but elimination. He once told a crowd that the Tutsi were enemies of the state and had to be cleansed. For every rebel Taylor sent into a town with a machete, Kambanda dispatched a document authorizing hate, death, and silence. Both men operated with precision, but with different tools. Taylor ruled through warlords, bribes, and the barrel of a gun. Kambanda ruled through bureaucracy, ink, and a system designed to kill efficiently. Taylor's crimes exploded across borders. Kambanda's infected his own people like a virus, turning neighbor against neighbor. And yet, their downfall was eerily similar. Taylor believed he was untouchable. Even after being ousted from Liberia, he sought exile in Nigeria, assuming his connections and former office would shield him. But the international pressure grew, and in 2006, he was arrested and transferred to the Special Court for Sierra Leone. The court found him guilty on 11 counts, including murder, rape, and using child soldiers. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison, a historic ruling, making him the first African head of state convicted for war crimes by an international tribunal. Kambanda never tried to run. He was captured in Kenya in 1997 and extradited to the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. He pled guilty to 6 charges, including genocide and incitement to genocide. In doing so, he became the first person in history to admit guilt for genocide before an international court. Despite his cooperation, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. 2 men, 2 paths. One led through the jungle, the other through paperwork. But in the end, both arrived at the same place, not in history books as heroes or nation builders, but as criminals whose names are now synonymous with betrayal, brutality, and the failure of leadership. Still, some questions remain. What drove them to embrace such cruelty? Was it survival, greed, ideology, or something colder? The realization that systems, when unchecked, can be manipulated to serve the darkest human impulses. Those questions linger as we look to their legacy, not just the damage they caused, but the warnings they left behind. Charles Taylor sits in a prison cell in the United Kingdom, serving a 50-year sentence for crimes he still refuses to fully acknowledge. Jean Kambanda is locked away for life in Mali after pleading guilty to genocide and crimes against humanity. Both men, once leaders of sovereign states, are now relics of an era that showed how fragile the line is between authority and atrocity. Their stories didn't end with the fall of their regimes. They echo in every courtroom where war crimes are judged, in every fragile state where power shifts faster than justice can keep up. Taylor's trial at the Special Court for Sierra Leone was not just a matter of guilt and punishment. It was a global message. His conviction marked the first time since the Nuremberg trials that a former head of state was held accountable in an international court. The verdict sent shockwaves through Africa and beyond, reminding the world that political office does not shield a man from morality or from law. The court found him guilty of aiding and abetting crimes committed by the Revolutionary United Front in Sierra Leone, crimes that included mass murder, sexual slavery, and the conscription of children as soldiers. Taylor never expressed remorse. Instead, he spoke of conspiracies, portraying himself as a victim of Western manipulation. Kambanda's trial played out differently. Unlike Taylor, he admitted his crimes, swiftly and in full. His case at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda became a milestone in international justice. He was the first person to be convicted of genocide under the 1948 Genocide Convention. But even as he confessed, his admission left a bitter taste. There was no apology to the victims, no act of reconciliation, just a legal acknowledgement of guilt. He tried to position himself as a cog in a larger machine, someone who followed a path he did not create, yet history would not allow him that distance. Where Taylor was dramatic, political, and self-righteous, Kambanda was cold, procedural, and unrepentant. And in this contrast lies a deeper truth. Evil can wear many faces. It can scream through a warlord's megaphone or whisper behind a desk. It can build armies or reorganize filing systems. But in the end, the result is the same. Silence, graves, generations of trauma. What have we learned from them? Perhaps that the most terrifying kind of leader is not the one who seizes power, but the one who exercises it within the system, using the laws, the offices, and the legitimacy of state machinery to commit unspeakable crimes. In Taylor, we see the danger of ambition without conscience. In Kambanda, the horror of obedience without morality. Their legacies live on in the textbooks of international law, in the documentaries that revisit their trials, in the eyes of survivors who still carry the weight of what happened. Yet those legacies are also a warning. They show how modern atrocities don't begin with mass killings. They begin with decisions, with silence, with people in suits and uniforms who tell themselves it's not their fault. So we return to that question, the one that refuses to leave us. Who is more dangerous, the man with the gun or the man with the stamp? Taylor or Kambanda? Blood or bureaucracy? Maybe the real answer is this: neither matters more than the systems that enable them, and the people who allow those systems to grow. Because history has shown, again and again, that it is not monsters who destroy nations. It is men. Men who once believed they were doing the right thing. Men who never imagined that the world would one day call them criminals. And by the time the world wakes up, it is always too late. Charles Taylor built a kingdom of chaos with diamonds and bullets. Jean Kambanda engineered genocide with spreadsheets and speeches. Two different methods, one shared result: devastation on a national scale. Their stories are a warning. Evil doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through protocol. Sometimes it shakes your hand. So we ask you, who is more dangerous, the one who gives the order or the one who signs it into law? Let us know what you think in the comments. If this story made you think or feel, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We've got more untold histories, more questions without easy answers, because the past isn't just behind us, it's warning us.